B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Thursday, June 22nd, 2017. It's very challenging these days. There is so much news that I'd like to comment on. It's hard to fit it all in approximately a half an hour. Yesterday, even though I dropped a couple of items, I think it ran about 39 minutes. Let's see how we do today, as the Republicans have finally unveiled their draconian effort to repeal Obamacare and replace it with crappy health insurance that eliminates coverage for tens of millions of people. And most importantly, I think the hidden item here that the corporate media is not alerting people to is that it eliminates the employer mandate. Now, I started talking about this when this popped up in the House version of the bill, and I saw very little attention to it in the corporate media. But consider that over the last 7 years, the battle of over Obamacare has been related to expanding the number of people covered by health insurance. And it locked into place the guarantee that most workers have that if you work a full-time job, you get employer-provided and at least subsidized health insurance coverage. Now, it used to be that the employer paid the whole freight, but that has changed over the years. Still, most people in the American workforce consider their health insurance as part of their pay package. And as a result, most Americans are going to get a huge pay cut if the Republican plans go forward. And that's not all. This, in my view, is a reverse Robin Hood scheme that takes from the poor to give more to the rich who are already just drowning in their money. It is so immoral, unconscionable, and a massive insult to the people who voted for Trump. Not to mention the rest of us, the majority. And so the cuts to Medicaid, while the Senate version gives a little more time for the cuts to take place and softens the letdown, the net result is about the same. And all this is intended to create the illusion of savings so that Republicans can ram through a tax cut for the ultra-wealthy later this year. And the Senate bill, which we were told was going to be very different from the House bill, well, it really maintains its structure with modest adjustments. And the Senate measure, like the House bill, will phase out the extra money that the federal government has provided to states as an incentive to expand eligibility for Medicaid. So whatever you think of the social safety net, as frayed and shredded as it is today, this basically just cuts a huge hole in it and allows millions of people with low incomes to fend for themselves. And not to be overly dramatic or hyperbolic, but people will die as a result. And rich people will get to buy an extra Range Rover, a third vacation home, set up trust funds and avoid taxes to pass along to their kids. This is really a remarkable development. And, of course, Mitch McConnell trotted this out saying, well, Obamacare is collapsing around us. Well, the Republicans have spent years undermining Obamacare, and when they came to power with the White House last fall, they began to systematically undermine confidence, throw uncertainty into the marketplace, and proceed to fulfill their own prediction. Yes, they have been sabotaging the law. And when you look at the elements of the Senate bill, what you see is that they maintain one piece from Obamacare, the dependent coverage up till age 26. But the individual mandate will be repealed, the employer mandate repealed, subsidies for out-of-pocket costs are reduced, and the promotion of health savings accounts, which can be useful to people with a substantial income, with enough disposable income to put money into a health savings account. And the subsidies that they're proposing are a little less mean than the House version in that they take income and not just age into account. As you know, Mitch McConnell has a real challenge getting this piece of crap through the Senate. And when he appeals to conservatives, he loses moderates. When he appeals to moderates, he loses conservatives. And the issue of abortion may become a factor, because while the House included language to ban funding for Planned Parenthood for a year and to restrict any coverage for abortion services in health care going forward, this is a real problem in the Senate because it triggers a requirement that allows for filibustering and amendments. And the Republicans are intent, as the Democrats did with Obamacare, just to be fair, on using the budget reconciliation process. And so items that are considered not germane to the budget are therefore subject to a 60-vote cloture, and that is a real problem for Mitch McConnell. And so the effort to appeal to anti-abortion extremists is one that could cause a loss of support from Maine Senator Susan Collins or Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski. Now, it's very interesting who has piped up in opposition to the newly revealed Senate version of Obamacare implosion. Take a look here at the top 10 American health insurance companies. They issued a statement saying the changes being considered in Congress could amount to a 25% shortfall in covering the actual cost of providing care to our nation's neediest citizens. They are saying these amounts spell deep cuts, not state flexibilities, in Medicaid. And the changes to Medicaid are really severe. For the first time, they're putting a per-customer limit on how much Medicare or Medicaid would pay. They're putting a lifetime cap on coverage, which means that if you've had a bout or two with cancer and run up hospital and medical bills of about $500,000, you may have used up your lifetime cap. The other comment from the insurance companies, they told McConnell that proposed caps on federal Medicaid spending would cause an enormous cost shift to the states, which could force them to raise taxes, reduce benefits, cut payments to health care providers, or eliminate coverage for certain beneficiaries. And those are honest comments from the people who have profited massively. As I told you last week, the industry profits for health insurance were somewhere on the order of $14 billion last year. And while they claim they've lost money on the Affordable Care Act and the exchanges, they've made out like a bandit on Medicare Advantage. So they're pretty hypocritical here, but their statement still, I think, is accurate. Now, it's interesting, in the House bill, there was a set-aside of $45 billion to address the opioid crisis in this country. That's $4.5 billion per year for 10 years. The Senate bill cuts that more than by half to $2 billion a year. And we know that that is a very serious problem that's going to require more than even the $45 billion that the House allocated there. Here's a statement from some rich fuckers, pardon my language, who oppose the morally bankrupt Senate bill. Speaking for the patriotic millionaires, Morris Pearl, former managing director at BlackRock, says this so-called health bill is appalling. It's morally bankrupt. Not only that, it will result in countless Americans becoming literally bankrupt, unable to support themselves, participate in the economy, or afford basic medical care. Taking health care away from millions of people just to give millionaires, billionaires, and health insurance companies a huge tax cut is un-American and cruel. As wealthy Americans, we want nothing to do with a tax cut, one that we don't need, that comes at the expense of millions of other Americans. If the members of the Senate are concerned about what is best for all their constituents, not just their wealthy donors, they will do the right thing and reject the Better Care Reconciliation Act. Now, that's the first reference I've heard to a new name for the Senate version. But you got to choke on that. The Better Care? We know that the insurance products that would be available after the Republican makeover of health care will be far less. They won't be better. They will be worse than anything that people are buying today. Trump says that this is a great bill, that it's going to be even greater and everything's going to be fine. But in his first reaction, he didn't give a full endorsement to the Senate draft. He instead, got on the political message, Obamacare is dead, and we're putting a plan out today that is going to be negotiated. We'd love to have some Democrats support, but they're obstructionists. Now, of course, he speaks with forked tongue because Democrats are not obstructing the idea of improving the Affordable Care Act, and it certainly needs some tweaks. But they are resisting being participants in the total dismantling of Obamacare. So Trump said that when he was asked if this has enough heart, he said, well, it's going to be very good. A little negotiation, but it's going to be great. And last night at a rally in Iowa with his fan club, Trump said he wanted to add some money to the legislation so it could have more heart. Well, that won't fix the fundamental framework here. You can put a little money here and some window dressing there, but it's not going to change. That this is a really, really, really mean effort to line the pockets of wealthy Americans. Trump has ended the guessing game that he started a few weeks ago and that apparently triggered Jim Comey to release his notes from their meetings. Trump had said that Comey had better hope that there are no tapes of their conversations before he goes leaking to the media. So, in fact, Comey did leak to the New York Times through an intermediary. And now Trump, after dodging the question and saying, oh, we'll talk about that in the near future. I mean, this is just such a waste of time and so much bullshit. But today, in speaking to the little people via Twitter, he exceeded the 140-character limit by going to 2 tweets. With all of the recently reported electronic surveillance, intercepts, unmasking, and illegal leaking of information, I have no idea whether there are tapes or recordings of my conversations with James Comey, but I did not make and do not have any such recordings. Now, this is an interesting denial because, of course, he created the whole perception that there might be tapes, that the Nixon recording in the White House has returned under this new Republican administration. And it just seems to be a pointless distraction. And now we can lay that distraction to rest and get ready for the next one. At his rally in Iowa last night, Trump called for a new law to bar immigrants from receiving welfare for at least 5 years. He thinks it's a brilliant idea. That law has been on the books for 10 years. But he is so ignorant. And nobody can straighten him out or school him on these things because he's got such a great brain. He also announced plans, and he patted himself on the back. He said, this was my idea. He said, I think we ought to put solar panels on the border wall with Mexico. And he suggested that then that would defray the cost and reduce the amount that Mexico will pay for the wall. I mean, it's just such amazing fantasy, this alternative reality that he creates. Well, we have a new leak from the special counsel, and it also may have come from the Senate Intelligence Committee, because both have met with the Director of National Intelligence, former Indiana Senator Dan Coats, and the current head of the NSA, Admiral Mike Rogers. And we're told that both Rogers and Coats described meetings with Trump where they called the meetings odd and said that the discussion made them uncomfortable. That is because Trump asked them to publicly state that there was no collusion between his campaign and Russia. So these guys admit, and this is central to proof of some sort of obstruction of justice, because this is what happened in Watergate. Nixon tried to get the CIA to tell the FBI to back off. And here we have Trump suggesting to Comey that he let the Flynn investigation go. He also hammered Comey to go public and lift the cloud, was his phrase. And so with this pattern developing, but still Coates and Rogers are kissing ass, want to hold on to their jobs because both men said they didn't believe the president was attempting to get them to interfere with the investigation. That seems incoherent to me. Every day I like to pause for a second and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like the incredible Carl Howard in Columbus, Ohio. He's always the first to click like when my daily podcast is posted on Facebook. Also, Jim Garrison, who is a very generous supporter, Carla Mahoney as well, and William Janetta. Thanks to each and every one of you for your support of the Peter B. Collins Podcast. And if you'd like to become a supporter, I'd like you to. Come on over to peterbcollins.com. You click the menu button no matter what device you're using. Pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber. That takes you to the sign-up page where you've got choices, and I hope you will make one. So yesterday there was a lot of talk about hacking and the election on Capitol Hill. There were 2 or 3 different hearings. Jay Johnson, the former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, said that the Obama administration was afraid that acknowledging Russian meddling in the 2016 election would reveal too much about intelligence gathering and be interpreted as taking sides in the race. And Jay Johnson, like many before him, flatly stated that Russia interfered with the election. He flatly stated that Vladimir Putin personally ordered it. And I still await any evidence that can support these contentions. Anyway, he said we were concerned that by making the statement that we might, in and of itself, be challenging the integrity of the election process itself. And as we know, if you're a regular listener here and you know about Greg Palast and you know about the guys from Columbus, Ohio, Fitrakis and Wasserman, you know that there are serious questions about the integrity of our elections. But most elected officials, because the system worked for them, take the position that I'm not going to talk about it because it might discourage people from voting for me. So Johnson said that around mid-August, federal officials began hearing reports of scanning and probing of some state voter database registries. Following that, they became convinced the Russians were behind those efforts, though he said it wasn't until January they were in a position to say that. Now, this conflicts with other reports that put the snooping in the time frame of late October and early November. We also have a divergence because one Homeland Security cyber official said that 19 states were targeted, while another has leaked to Bloomberg that it was 39 states. But it appears that not a single one was penetrated in a way that may have affected the election. At least that's what they keep reassuring us. No vote tallies were affected. There was attempted tampering with some registration files. But there's no indication that that actually affected an individual's ability to vote. And so it's hard to reconcile these kind of competing narratives. That we should be very afraid that Russia hacked our election, they're going to do it again. And Jay Johnson did call for efforts to tighten up our cybersecurity related to elections. I don't dispute that, but let me just point out that all this Russia finger-pointing is a distraction from the likely prime suspect. Now, it is possible that Russia hacked, okay? I can't prove it, and I can't prove that they didn't. But it's much more likely that Republican operatives, taking up the legacy of Karl Rove and the election thefts of 2000 and 2004, have continued those activities. And yet we never hear about any domestic suspects. And we know it's possible to blame this stuff on Russia with fake IP addresses. Now, the leader of the National Association for Secretaries of State here in the U.S., Connie Lawson, who is Secretary of State of Indiana, said that those summer intelligence agency reports never reached her, and that she read about these attempted hacking of state-level election sites in the media. And even when the Obama administration in January declared election equipment as critical infrastructure, it left secretaries of state puzzled because they don't really know what that means. And so the coordination between state and federal agencies is clearly an issue here. The Intercept has dirt on its fingers. I can't say blood on its hands yet, but it certainly has dirt. And it hasn't helped itself. In a report today, and this was written by Alex Emmons, regarding the woman who leaked information to The Intercept, and we learned about her weird name, Reality Winner. Well, The Intercept has claimed that they're conducting a special investigation, a reality check, if you will, on what happened in the leak process with Reality Winner. They continue to exaggerate the value of the document that she disclosed, and they promote this as something of a contribution to our understanding, when in fact the document that she released was just more assertions and didn't offer any proof about this alleged Russian hacking. The Intercept is taking to task Senator Mark Warner, the top Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, because he's calling on the Department of Homeland Security to reveal more about Russia's attempts to hack into state and local election systems, and at the same time, he continues to demand full prosecution of Reality Winner. Now, I don't support full prosecution of Reality Winner. I support whistleblowers, and I would like to know her motive, and I'd like to know more about what she was hoping to achieve. But Senator Warner says she should be pursued to the full extent of the law. And The Intercept is yet to cop to its responsibility, or at least partial responsibility, for making Reality Winner vulnerable to this investigation and prosecution. Jason Leopold's done it again. Yesterday, he released to the general public and to other media outlets the results of a Freedom of Information Act request that he made for reports by the Office of Inspector General for the Intelligence Community. And he came up with a real doozy, a heavily redacted report. I'm linking to an article in U.S. News that includes a link to the original report, should you like to read it. And what it shows is this female employee at the Department of at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence had free access, unfettered access to these very sensitive and secure databases that we're told people are only allowed to access with warrants and probable cause, especially if they relate to Americans. But the report shows that this unnamed woman snooped on the files of Edward Snowden 357 times between June of 2013 and just a 3-week period, really. And she had an additional 300-plus violations of the Privacy Act. And she was doing it for not only the government, but these 14 part-time jobs that she had as a security advisor to major corporations. She also violated the rules by searching her own name 442 times. That is explicitly forbidden in the training manuals. And if you like things a little bit erotic, there is an indication that she was found, or at least investigated, for sexual activity at work. Unfortunately, that part is heavily redacted, so I'll save you the time of digging into it yourself. Now, the New York Times has an eye-popping story about the security chief, the cybersecurity chief at IDT Corporation, who alleges that when the WannaCry spyware, ransomware started to infect computers worldwide, that in some cases it was used to obscure deeper hacks using a separate piece of software stolen from the NSA's cyber weapons armory. And this, of course, is the Shadow Brokers hack that released all kinds of black bag tools used by our government. And a guy named Ben Oni, who is the director of security for IDT, discovered this. And he says that this is worse than WannaCry. He compares it to a nuclear weapon. And he said that his systems were hit by the twin packages called Eternal Blue and Double Pulsar. And a separate analyst did a search and discovered that tens of thousands of machines around the world are infected with Double Pulsar. And that once they get in, the back door that they create is available to anybody else who waltzes by. So I've linked to the story. There's more detail there. Check it out at your convenience. Brad Friedman is the proprietor of bradblog.com and a longtime ally of mine. And he took a look at the special elections in Georgia and South Carolina and declared, in both cases, the computer-tabulated results are based on votes cast on 100% unverifiable touchscreen voting systems. In both cases, the results may be absolutely right or completely wrong. In both cases, absolutely nobody knows for certain either way. And in both cases, if anybody tells you otherwise, they're either lying or they don't know what they're talking about. And he does note that Jon Ossoff defeated Karen Handel in the Georgia race by nearly 2-1 on the only verifiable ballots used in the race, the paper absentee mail-in ballots. But when it comes to all the other ballots, you just have to have faith. He also comments on the Senate Intelligence Committee yesterday, how top intelligence officials from FBI and DHS testified in regard to concerns. Neither they nor their elections officials who also testified seem to know much of anything about the actual vulnerability of U.S. voting systems, or if they did, they certainly offered a whole lot of demonstrably inaccurate information about whether voting systems are connected to the Internet. They are. And whether they are vulnerable. They are. And speaking of that Georgia race, it's producing a lot of backbiting in the Democratic Party. And I led this yesterday, calling on my old friend Nancy Pelosi to step down as the Democratic leader and make way for a new generation of leadership. I'm not alone. Congressperson Philemon Vela from Texas, quote, I think you'd have to be an idiot to think we could win the House with Pelosi at the top. Nancy Pelosi is not the only reason that Ossoff lost, but she certainly is one of the reasons. Defender Mike Thompson, a Democratic representative from Northern California, said it doesn't matter who our leader is, the Republicans will always run against them, someone else in our caucus, or Willie Horton. Well, some of that is true. But Nancy Pelosi, I don't think, helped herself. In a news conference in Washington on Tuesday, it was yesterday, I'm sorry, and she tweaked her Democratic colleagues who were calling for her to step down. She said, when it comes to personal ambition and having fun on TV, have your fun. I love the arena. I thrive on competition. I welcome the discussion. But I feel very confident in the support that I have in my caucus. And here's another Democrat who wants her to step down, Kathleen Rice from New York State. Nancy Pelosi was a great speaker. She's a great leader, but her time has come and gone. I believe that she is not the leader for the future of the Democratic Party. It's that simple. So Pelosi, trying not to be defensive, but she answered a question that I'm not sure was asked. She said, you want me to sing my praises? Is that what you're saying? She said, I think I'm worth the trouble, quite frankly. I'm a master legislator. I'm a strategic, politically astute leader. My leadership is recognized by many around the country. That's why I'm able to attract the financial support that I do, which is essential to our elections, sad to say. I have experience in winning the Congress. When people said to us in 2005, you don't have a chance, be prepared for a Republican permanent majority, Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid and I didn't accept that. And she closed by saying, I don't think that any party should allow the opposite party to choose their leaders. Well, get the message, Nancy. It is time. Now, some employees at Uber aren't willing to accept that Travis Kalanick has resigned as their CEO, And we're not sure who's circulating this petition. We're told managers are sending the petition to employees. And, there aren't that many employees at Uber. Most of the people who drive are not employees of the company. They're independent contractors. So there is this skeleton staff. And some of them are signing on to this petition. One person said TK, using the initials of Travis Kalanick. No matter his flaws, everyone has them, was one of the best leaders I have seen. A lot of people are extremely loyal to and in the cult of personality that he had, one engineer told BuzzFeed. Okay. Today I'm releasing an in-depth interview with an author, Steve Early, who's written a fascinating book about the city that is just one bridge away from me, just east of where I am, the town of Richmond, California, dominated by the Chevron refinery that's been there for decades, and the political landscape was almost owned by Chevron until a group of progressives who ignored the message from Citizens United organized and took back the town. And that effort was led by the first green mayor of a city of this size across the United States, Gail McLaughlin. Here's an excerpt from my conversation with Steve Early, where he talks about the successes of Gail McLaughlin.
Gail has been one of the key catalysts of change in Richmond over the last decade and a half. She's a relatively new arrival to the city, moved from Chicago in 2000, and 4 years later she was running for city council for the first time, was elected. She's been serving on the city council ever since, and for an 8-year period between 2006 and 2014, as you mentioned, she made Richmond the largest city in the country, and a rather unlikely place for this, to have a green mayor. Mm-hmm. The extraordinary thing about Gail's years in City Hall was that she approached the job in very non-traditional ways. She used it as a bully pulpit to rally the community that put her into office around a whole range of workers' rights, environmental justice, and other causes related to immigration and the problems with Chevron. She appointed a lot of like-minded people, progressives, younger activists, to boards and commissions, and she recruited and inspired other people to run for office too. Since 2004, progressives who belong to the Richmond Progressive Alliance have won 10 out of 16 city council and mayoral races, which is a pretty extraordinary track record. And the city council today has a 5-member out of 7 progressive supermajority as a result of 2 more victories in council elections last fall.
I invite you to listen to the full interview with Steve Early. It's available for my subscribers today at peterbcollins.com, at iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, most of the outlets of this podcast. Now, we were just in Richmond. It borders on Berkeley. Most people around the nation have heard of Berkeley, the site of the UC campus, and a town that is well known for its progressive attitude. Well, there was a contentious city council meeting on Tuesday night centering around the city's contract to train its police officers with a federal program called Urban Shield. And many, including me, are concerned that police agencies are being militarized with material, resources, machinery, and training from the federal government. So what's deeply ironic is that protests broke out and people unfurled signs. They approached the stage where the council members were, and this led to a police response. Officers hit demonstrators with batons. They threatened them with a tear gas launcher. There were a couple of arrests. And one of the critics, a protester, said, "What we saw was a clear example of how the kinds of training practices and techniques of Urban Shield played out on the very community that was there to end it." Just a little bit of irony in the People's Republic of Berkeley. And next door to Berkeley is Oakland, the city with the rogue police department that I have criticized persistently and consistently. Now there is a new report that was ordered by a judge And the investigators have faulted top city leaders for their failed response to a sex scandal that surfaced last year. This involved the teenage daughter of an Oakland Police Department dispatcher. She used the street name Celeste GOP. She had sexual encounters with a large number. It's more than 10 or 15 or 20 police officers from Oakland alone, and the county sheriff and other police agencies in neighboring communities also had clients of this teen prostitute. It's a huge scandal. It caused the police chief to resign, and his two replacements were summarily dismissed in short order. And this is really just another black mark on the Oakland Police Department. It's been under federal oversight for years now. And the elected mayor, who had authority over the police chief, fumbled this. They seem to think that it would just go away. And it remains a huge stain on this community, not just Oakland. But when you see people close ranks to protect bad cops, that is fundamentally the cause of the distrust between the police and the communities they're supposed to be serving. Thanks for listening to my News and Comment podcast. It's available on YouTube. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.